So Catherine Ricketts is an essayist and songwriter. Her nonfiction on the arts, grief, joy, and spirituality appears or is forthcoming in the Kenyon Review Online, the Plowshares blog, the Christian Century, Image, The Millions, Paste, and WXPN's The Key. She studied writing at the University of Pennsylvania and holds an MFA in nonfiction from Seattle Pacific University. She's at work on 2 nonfiction books, the first about grief and beauty, and the second about motherhood and artistic practice. So thank you so much for being here, Catherine, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ishani. Thank you to the Blue Stoop for the opportunity for all of us to gather together today, albeit virtually. I would love to begin, let's see. I would love to begin by, if you are comfortable, just introducing yourself and letting everyone know your name, your pronouns, if you'd like to share them, and what you write. If you would like to introduce yourself, please show your video so that I can see you and call on you. We'll start with Marjorie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marjorie, and I have a personal blog where I've been writing for about 12 years. First person nonfiction, a lot about motherhood, creativity, and I'm also an astrologer, so a lot of that study is incorporated in there.
Thanks. Alyssa?
Hi, my name is Alyssa. My pronouns are she, her. I don't really write. I mean, I guess personally I write. So,
yeah. Darcy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Darcy. Pronouns are she, her. And I will say up front that if I drop off, it's because I had surgery on Monday. So I'm going to try to hang in there. I write, only since the pandemic did I start writing poetry, and most of my poetry is about social justice themes.
Beautiful. Darcy, I hope this will be a healing time for you. Arden? Oh, Arden, I can't hear you speaking, unfortunately.
You can come back to me.
I hear you now. We'll come back to you. How about Daniel?
Hey, I'm Daniel, he, him. I write a lot of nonfiction essays. Yeah.
Cool. Lourdes?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lourdes, she, her, and I usually write essays centering around family relationships.
Arathi?
Hi, everyone. My name's Arthi, and I don't do much writing, but most of the writing I do is like biology or STEM based.
Cool. Arden, back to you.
Hi, I'm Arden. My pronouns are he and they. I write fiction and some poetry and personal writing, I guess, about being trans, about queer relationships and science fiction.
Cool. Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne, she, her, and I write fiction, nonfiction, and also poetry. I've been writing a lot of poetry in the past few years, and my themes are sense of place and loss and grief.
Thanks, Anne. Ebony?
I write mostly poetry, and a lot of it is centered around the idea that permission has already been granted and we just have to step into what we're made for.
Thank you. Your name is listed for some reason as my name on that thing. You can click the little 3 dots in your square, and I believe you can click rename, and you can show us your name there. Cool. Ebony.
Hi everyone, Ebony, she, her pronouns. I don't write much, but I'm trying to get back into that more regularly. And when I do write, it's been fiction, but I'm really interested now in writing like personal essays, memoirs, focusing on spirituality and grief. And so this is perfect when I saw this in my email, so excited.
I'm glad there are some points of connection there. Kelly.
Hi, my name is Kelly. I write mostly like creative nonfiction or fiction around traveling, and I've studied Spanish for many, many years in a Spanish major, so I just always like to incorporate things about that culture. I think, you know, there's so many beautiful aspects, so I try to put that in my writing as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Deborah.
Hi, I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but I think I know what you want us to say. I'm Deborah, she, her. I have off and on written for a blog of mine and some other creative projects, but it's been a few years. I'm noticing a theme of grief. That's part of the reason it's been a few years. So I'm looking to get back into that, and I'm especially interested in creative nonfiction that has to do with spirituality.
Beautiful. And Jenaba, forgive me if I've mispronounced.
You got it. Well done. I'm Jenaba Giger, and I actually just recently published a book of liturgical poetry on spirituality and sexuality.
Beautiful. You'll have to, if there's information about that, please drop it in the chat. And if anyone who mentioned a blog or some other public facing outlet for your writing, if you'd like to drop that in the chat, that could be a nice way for us to explore each other's work. If I haven't called your name, it's because I don't see your video, and we'll assume that means that you'd prefer to just listen in, and that's cool. And if you would like to introduce yourself in another way, please drop an intro into the chat. Okay, so a little bit about me, and then a little bit about the form that we're going to talk about today while we're on introductions. So my name is Catherine Ricketts. You can call me Kat or Catherine. I write nonfiction about the arts, and that work has been informed by my day jobs, which have been at institutions like WXPN and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And I also write about grief and spirituality. I should say as we begin that my own religious tradition is Protestant Christianity. So a lot of the thinking that I have done in spiritual writing has been in reference to reacting against, questioning, and surrounding that tradition. Surprising loss in my family in the past few years of my life has caused me to examine what I believe more closely, asking difficult questions about God in the face of death. And I've done a lot of that work through nonfiction writing. I have found some answers and have become very comfortable with the areas where I don't have answers. And that's the kind of writing that I'm interested in talking about today. So the type of spiritual writing that I have in mind when I talk about this genre is not sacred texts per se, not sermon or op-ed meant to convince a reader of the writer's religious perspective. I'm interested instead in work that uses all of the tools of literary writing to explore spiritual questions and to try to make sense of spiritual experience. This kind of writing, as I said in the description of this workshop, it has the ability to immerse readers in the complex interior of another person's faith, their rituals, their community, their convictions and questions. And it can turn a polarizing topic like religion into an opportunity for empathy and discovery, as the writer themselves leads the way in openness, opening to having one's mind changed, open to discovering something new. And it can be really hard to write in this way because so many of our religious traditions train us to be wary of uncertainty. And so we might be primed to come to the page with a conviction rather than with a question. But I'm convinced that working out our religious and spiritual questions through writing can lead us to greater openness and to deeper truths about what it means to be human, whether there is, and what a spiritual dimension might look like. I love the quote from St. Augustine, who said, "Let me examine myself again and more closely." Dr. Cornell West writes, "Serious faith begins when we experience the sweet shipwreck of the mind and the bittersweet cracking open of the heart." And I love writing where I sense that the writer, in the process of producing the work, has been cracked open spiritually and has discovered something new. So I've invited you all, if you would like, to bring a piece of writing in reference to any spiritual, philosophical, religious tradition, and to share. I thought, I was prompted to do this because so much of my reading in this genre has been in my own tradition, and I'm really eager to hear from just a diversity of perspectives from readings that may be in reference to your own tradition. So it'll be a really great learning opportunity for me. If you are interested in reading something, maybe like a page, a poem, something brief, use the raise hands feature. And I will call on people. And if you'd like to say a word about why you like the passage, what you think the writer is doing that's really effective, or how it has been moving to you, please do that. We will share passages, we'll swap passages for about 15 minutes. And then we are going to do some writing together based on 2 prompts. All right. Ebony, would you like to begin?
Sure. So I recently started reading a book called The Deepest Peace by Zenju Earthland Manuel. And it's not my, I was raised as a Christian, but this is a book and she's Buddhist. So I chose this because reading it feels like meditation, her language and just her sort of like the rhythm of the writing. So I'll just read just like a paragraph. As I walked down the aisle in a black robe, my feet erased the footprints of yesterday. As the humble daughter of the enslaved, I have come to a practice of stillness the old Africans, although bought and sold, understood. They knew the importance of silence, of listening for guidance. The gateway to peace came to those who did not give up, those who did not believe themselves to be what was imposed upon them. I continue to walk the cold floors of the Zendo. No one knows I'm being escorted to my seat by my ancestors. I understand that this is where my ancestors have brought me to see them, to see myself, to see life.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ebony. Daniel?
Yeah, hey, my quote is from Annie Dillard. She is probably as close to religious tradition as I have. I will drop the full quote in the chat so that you can either read along or reference it later if you feel like it. This is an essay about polar exploration and how it might relate to just searching for God and the sublime. So it goes, everywhere polar prose evokes the absolutes, these ideas of eternity and perfection, as if they were some perfectly visible part of the landscape. They went, I say, partly in search of the sublime, and they found it the only way it can be found, here or there, around the edges, tucked into the corners of the days. For they were people, all of them, even the British, and despite the purity of their conceptions, they manhauled their humanity to the poles. So I find it kind of funny, but also really moving at the same time.
Can you say again the book or essay that's from?
Yeah, it's from Teaching a Stone to Talk. And I forget the name of the essay, but I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. I love Dillard. Alyssa?
So mine is from the Four Agreements. I read this book before, but I enjoyed the entirety of it, but today I decided to just kind of like open it to a random page, and it ended up being something that really sat with me and is kind of like relevant to, I guess, some rituals or practices that I've introduced into my life as of late. So I'll just read this page. So it says, if you do your best in the search for personal freedom, in the search for self-love, you will discover that it's just a matter of time before you find what you're looking for. It's not about daydreaming or sitting for hours dreaming in meditation. You have to stand up and be a human. You have to honor the man or woman that you are, respect your body, enjoy your body, love your body, feed, clean, and heal your body, exercise, and do what makes your body feel good. This is a puja to your body, and that is a communion between you and God. You don't need to worship idols of the Virgin Mary, the Christ, or the Buddha. You can if you want to. If it feels good, do it. Your own body is a manifestation of God, and if you honor your body, everything will change for you. When you practice giving love to every part of your body, you plant seeds of love in your mind, and when they grow, you will love, honor, and respect your body immensely.
That's going to relate perfectly to one of the writing exercises that we will do. So that's awesome. Thank you. Darcy?
Hi, I'm actually going to read something that I had written, and it was published on a website called ritualwell.org, which curates poems and prayers and liturgy of the Jewish faith. So this was written the summer of 2020 when our nation was in turmoil. And it's called Kaddish for Our Country. And Kaddish is the Jewish prayer for mourning. And I interspersed the Hebrew with the English. Yikadal v'yikadash. We mourn our country, where politics trump policy, where tantrums and tweets supersede tolerance and truth, where white privilege has colored our perception of the world, where hatred has become the hero. Shemay Rabbah. We mourn our country, where the flag has become a symbol of division instead of unity, where people speak with fists, not facts, where we build walls, not bridges. Divra Hirute, where neighbor has become nemesis, where science is but hearsay. Yamlich Mochite, we mourn the loss of civility, replaced by skewed priorities and scathing accusations, a country where we no longer feel safe in our schools, our cars, our houses of worship. B'cheichon v'yomechon, where smiles have been replaced by sneers, kind gestures by jeers, faith by fear. Israel, where earnings take precedence over our earth, where masks reveal who we really are, where we are in physical and spiritual lockdown, where we are enslaved to a system that fails to protect the most vulnerable. Bagala Vizman Kariv. We mourn that our melting pot is boiling over with anger and hate. We have lost our compass. We have lost our patience. We have lost our soul. We mourn that our country is blind to injustice, deaf to common sense, mute in defending the oppressed. May we open our eyes to the possibility, our ears to dialogue, our hearts to compassion. V'imru, amen.
Beautiful. Darcy, will you share a link to that in the chat if you haven't already? Thank you. Alyssa, did you want to add something? Or is your hand just still up?
I think it's just up, sorry.
No problem. Anne.
Unmute here. Hi. I chose a poem that is an older poem, but I got your email this morning, this is what I thought of. So my tradition is, I grew up as an Episcopalian, and I left church for a while, and then I came back, and I'm a practicing Catholic. And I am very drawn to the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins. And when I got the assignment this morning, I just thought about this poem, which also has, so it definitely has, you know, Christian imagery in it. It also has one of my favorite lines in all of literature, God's grandeur. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with awe bright wings.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to read? Allison, I see you. Oh, okay. I see Allison in the chat here, and then Arden after that.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So just trigger warning for the title. This is one of my favorite poems, and my 10th grade English teacher was somehow allowed to do this with us, and it's still one of my favorite poems 20 years later. The title is Preface to a 20-volume Suicide Note by Amiri Baraka for Kelly Jones, born 16 May 1959. Lately, I've become accustomed to the way the ground opens up and envelops me each time I go out to walk the dog, or the broad-edged, silly music the wind makes when I run for the bus. Things have come to that. And now each night I count the stars, and each night I get the same number. And when they will not come to be counted, I count the holes they leave. Nobody sings anymore. And then last night, I tiptoed up to my daughter's room and heard her talking to someone. And when I opened the door, there was no one there, only she on her knees, peeking into her own clasped hands. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. Arden?
Hi. I brought Zen in the Art of Archery by Eugene Herrigal, which was helpful to me at a particular time when I was having a lot of intrusive thoughts. This is from basically the introduction, describing how archery can be a spiritual practice. The contest consists in the archer aiming at himself and yet not at himself, in hitting himself and yet not himself, and thus becoming simultaneously the aimer and the aim, the hitter and the hit. For to use some expressions which are nearest to the heart of the masters, it is necessary for the archer to become, in spite of himself, an unmoved center. Then comes the supreme and ultimate miracle. The art becomes artless, shooting becomes not shooting, a shooting without bow and arrow. The teacher becomes pupil again, the master a beginner, the end a beginning, and the beginning perfection.
Wonderful. Uda, I see you have a raised hand.
Yes, I have this very simple skeleton of a poem that is based on the fruit of the spirit. on the different aspects of the one fruit of the Spirit. That was from a preacher that I used to listen to from Philadelphia when I lived in New York City as a child. And it just seems simple, simple, even in the time of the Cold War. And it's Cold War, hot war right now again. So love is the key. Love is joy. Joy is, I'm sorry, let's start from the beginning again. Love is the key. Joy is love singing. Peace is love resting. Patience is love enduring. Kindness is love's touch. Goodness is love's character. Faithfulness is love's habit. Gentleness is love's self-forgetfulness. Self-control is love holding the reins. By Donald Gray Barnhouse.
Thank you, Uda. All right, last call. Okay. I'm going to share my screen and I will share, excuse me, I will share a poem. Okay, do you all see that? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Great. Hold on one second. Okay, great. So you see, do you see where it says just writing exercises? Is that all you see? Okay, cool. All right, so this is a poem that has been meaningful to me in seasons of grief by Rilke. I am praying again, awesome one. You hear me again as words from the depths of me rush toward you in the wind. I've been scattered in pieces, torn by conflict, mocked by laughter, washed down in drink. In alleyways, I sweep myself up out of garbage and broken glass. With my half mouth, I stammer you, who are eternal in your symmetry. I lift to you my half hands in wordless beseeching that I may find again the eyes with which I once beheld you. I am a house gutted by fire, where only the guilty sometimes sleep before the punishment that devours them hounds them out into the open. I am a city by the sea, sinking into a toxic tide. I am strange to myself, as though someone unknown had poisoned my mother as she carried me. It's here in all the pieces of my shame that now I find myself again. I yearn to belong to something, to be contained in an all-embracing mind that sees me as a single thing. I yearn to be held in the great hands of your heart. Oh, let them take me now. Into them I place these fragments, my life, and you, God, spend them however you want. Thank you all for these beautiful readings. It's just so good to be together and to listen to words that have been meaningful to one another, and from a nice diversity of perspectives. So thank you. So for the next 30 minutes, I just want to spend some time writing together. I will lead us with a couple of prompts, and maybe you'll learn a new tool today for your own practice of spiritual writing. To begin, I just want to take, we'll take just 3 minutes to do an exercise that might frame our time and just answer these questions or one of these questions. Is there a spiritual question you'd like to explore? An inexplicable experience you'd like to understand? A doubt you'd like to probe or express for the first time? A tension you wish you could resolve? Try writing this in a single sentence or up to 1 paragraph, but just kind of get some clarity around what might bring you to the page today. All right. The first exercise that we're going to do together has to do with what Alyssa's reading was about. It has to do with the body. So one of the things that has stayed with me most from my study of writing has been the technique of staying close to the body. And I think this is especially useful when we're thinking about spiritual questions, because our spiritual questions and experiences can feel really overwhelming in scope. They can feel abstract and kind of esoteric or ethereal. And writing abstraction can feel very overwhelming to a writer and alienating to readers. One way into writing about heady topics is to stay close to the body. So how does a spiritual experience feel in your head, in your chest, in your belly, in your limbs? What are you doing with your body? Either when you think about a memory of a spiritual experience or when you are holding a spiritual question. Here are a couple of excerpts that have been helpful to me in thinking about staying close to the body. Would someone like to read this first one from Zaina Arafat? I'll call on people. Marjorie, would you read this first quotation?
Yes. Her words travel past my head, down my throat, and land on my stomach. They stay there, effortlessly imposing their weight. You want me to go on?
Yeah, why don't you read the second one too? This is by E.J. Koh from The Magical Language of Others.
Okay.
And this, I can just frame this by saying, well, I won't frame it. You can read it.
Okay. I stopped going to the new school when he dropped me off. I walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench facing an empty gazebo for 6 hours before returning to the school where he picked me up without a word in his car. At the house, I slept for 12 hours or longer if I could, and come morning, I watched the sun come up like an egg cracked open underwater, its yolk rising with listlessness.
I like that passage because she doesn't ever tell us that she's depressed, but we just see a depressed body moving through the world. And then this last one I will read. This is from Christian Wyman's My Bright Abyss. And the context here is that the narrator has been diagnosed with a terminal illness and has also just fallen in love at a late age, and is kind of considering a return to the church after many, many years away. That was the cloud I was walking under early one bright winter morning, maybe a week after the exchange of emails with the preacher, when I heard my name. I turned around to see him, half running down the street toward me as he tried to pull a flannel shirt on over his t-shirt, careful not to trip over his untied shoes. I was in no mood to chat, especially not to an enthusiastic preacher, and all my thoughts were hostile. But I stopped. We had a kind of introduction as he tied his shoes, and then he asked if he could walk me to the train station. Those days are a blur to me, but I remember two things from that morning very clearly. I remember Matt straining to find some language that would be true to his own faith and calling, and at the same time adequate to the tragedy and faithlessness, the tragedy of faithlessness that he perceived in me. And I remember when we parted, there was an awkward moment when the severity of my situation and our unfamiliarity with each other left us with no words. And in a gesture that I'm sure was completely unconscious, he placed his hand over his heart for just a second as a flicker of empathetic anguish crossed his face. It sliced right through me. It cut through the cloud I was living in and let the plain day pour its balm upon me. It was, I am sure, one of those moments when we enact and reflect a mercy and mystery that are greater than we are, when the void of God and the love of God, incomprehensible pain, and the peace that passeth understanding come together in a simple human act. We stood for a minute in the aftermath, not talking, and then went our suddenly less separate ways. I'm drawn in that passage to the gesture, the simplicity and profundity of a man placing his hand over his heart. So our exercise here, and we'll do this for 10 minutes. What does your spiritual question feel like in your body? What does it sound like? What color is it? What does it smell like? Recall a scene that is related to your spiritual question and recount it with as much embodied detail as possible. include gesture and physical sensation, and try to avoid religious jargon and abstraction. Okay. The next technique I'm pulling from the form of memoir, although I'm sure this shows up in autobiographical poetry and when developing a character in fiction and in other places. But in memoir, we talk about me now and me then. So often in memoir, there are two different persona at play on the page at the same time. The persona of the mind of the writer at the time of writing, and the persona of the self that they are reflecting upon. And having a fully developed sense of each of those personas can be very useful in demonstrating the growth that has occurred in a person's life or the changes that have occurred in a person's life. And I think this is particularly interesting in spiritual writing because spiritual growth and change, I think, is healthy, and having our spirits changed and our minds changed over time can be a really interesting thing to reflect on. A couple of, well, I'll just read the one passage here for the sake of time. This is from Alexander Chee's essay, The Querent, about the practice of tarot. And look for the kind of the wise current self, or the self who has learned something, and the self that he is reflecting upon. On reflection, it seems to me much of what I love about literature is also what I love about the tarot. Archetypes at play, hidden forces, secrets brought to light. When I bought the deck, it was for the same reason I bought the car. I wanted to feel powerful in the face of my fate. I felt too much like a character in a novel, buffeted by cruel turns of fate. I wanted to look over the top of my life and see what was coming. I wanted to be its author. If I were in fact writing a novel about someone like me, of course, this is exactly what would lead him astray. I'll hold off on this other passage, but our exercise here is write a scene that depicts your spiritual life when you were a teenager. Write it from the voice of yourself today. Use some of the tools that we've seen here to establish two different personas, your teenage self and your current self. And if your teenage moments are not a time that you wish to return to right now, you could do yesterday, you could do 3 years ago, or when you were a child, or some other time where there is some psychological distance or growth or change that has occurred between that moment and now. All right. If you got a little start on some writing and feel like you could keep doing it, you're welcome to just tune out the rest of what I say and just keep writing. We have 4 minutes until the end here. Is there anyone that would like to either read something that you wrote or reflect on the experience of this writing? You can just unmute yourself and speak.
I can say something. I particularly struggle with naming things as they feel in my body, and I know that I really need to work on that. So the exercise that we focused on that was particularly helpful for me. So thank you.
Yeah, good.
I have a short passage, something about the spiritual questions feeling in my body. The smell, I put for smell, I just went in this direction. A sweat that is too cool to warm me, too warm to I'm sorry, to beckon showers of supposed warmth. A trip through a torture ordinary and stabilized for, quote, everyone else, unquote, becoming yet more possible.
Thank you, Uta.
I think lately, like spiritually, I've been having a lot of thoughts and questions around like just being aligned with my purpose as a person. And so like physically, I've, I would say I've been more maybe like selfish with my body, I guess. And I've been working out a lot more, and it kind of made me laugh when I was reflecting on this because of I would say like the power behind my movements more recently. Like I apologized to my roommate this morning for getting out of bed and like literally yelling. Like I think I said like, let's go. Like it's just like that's just where I am right now. And I think a lot of that is tied to just kind of these like big spiritual moves that I'm making right now. And a lot of that is like coming up physically for me. And so it was like nice to reflect on that and see that there's like momentum there.
I'm gonna formally close our time because it is 5 o'clock. And then if anyone would like to stay and continue sharing, I'm here. I want to thank the Blue Stoop for hosting us today. And I encourage you to check out, is it bluestoop.org?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks, Kat. bluestoop.org. And I threw a link in earlier, but I will go ahead and throw it in again about our future Wednesdays on the Stoop. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you so much for this absolutely lovely time. I feel like I got a lot out of this, and I kind of feel like everyone else did too, right? So thank you again. And other than that, have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, Ishani. And I put in the chat, if you would like to stay in touch with me, a great way to do that is on Instagram at by Catherine Ricketts. And I believe many of you have my email address because I sent a note today. So feel free to reach out that way as well. Well, our time is formally up, but is there anyone else that would like to either read something or